Okay.
Welcome, everyone.
А где города?
Наверное, что не появился.
Гуру Махарадж тут, просто он будет, скорее всего, без видео, у него нестабильный интернет, он сказал только что, поэтому будет без видео.
Intend to discuss, well, so I'm reading from the Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 9, confidential knowledge, text number 34. Manmana, can you hear me?
Yes, Guru Maharaj, Mata Shalavangavata, I hear you.
Okay. Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyajimam namaskuru mamai vaishasis yuktaivam atmana matparayanaha. Engage your mind always in thinking of me, become my devotee, offer your obeisances to me, and worship me, being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. Purport. In this verse it is clearly indicated that Krishna consciousness is the only means of being delivered from the clutches of this contaminated material world. Sometimes unscrupulous commentators distort the meaning of what is clearly stated here, that all devotional service should be offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Unfortunately, unscrupulous commentators divert the mind of the reader to that which is not at all feasible. Such commentators do not know that there is no difference between Krishna's mind and Krishna. Krishna is not an ordinary human being. He is absolute truth. His body, his mind, and he himself are one and absolute. It is stated in the Karma Purana, as is quoted by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami in his Anubhashya comments on Chaitanya Charitamrita, 5th chapter, Adilila, verses 41 to 48. Dehadehi vidoyam neshware vidyate kvachit. This means that there's no difference in Krishna, the Supreme Lord, between himself and his body. But because the commentators do not know the science of Krishna, they hide Krishna and divide his personality from his mind or from his body. Although this is sheer ignorance of the science of Krishna, some men make profit out of misleading people. There are some who are demoniac. They also think of Krishna, but enviously, just like King Kamsa, Krishna's uncle. He was also thinking of Krishna always, but he thought of Krishna as his enemy. He was always in anxiety, wondering when Krishna would come to kill him. That kind of thinking will not help us. One should be thinking of Krishna in devotional love. That is bhakti. One should cultivate the knowledge of Krishna continuously. What is that favorable cultivation? It is to learn from the bona fide teacher. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and we have several times explained that his body is not material, it is personal knowledge. This kind of talk about Krishna will help one become a devotee. Understanding Krishna otherwise, from the wrong source, will prove fruitless. One should therefore engage his mind in the eternal form, the primeval form of Krishna. With conviction in his heart that Krishna is the Supreme, he should engage himself in worship.
What's going on? Is there a class? Is there a Zoom class? Agnihotra? Someone? Hello?
Can you hear me speaking, Niguna? Niguna?
Yes,
can you
Guru
hear me
Maharaj,
speaking?
we hear you okay.
Okay. One should therefore engage his mind in the eternal form, the primeval form of Krishna, with conviction in his heart that Krishna is the supreme. He should engage himself in worship. There are hundreds and thousands of temples in India for the worship of Krishna, and devotional service is practiced there. When such practice is made, one has to offer obeisances to Krishna. One should lower his head before the deity and engage his mind, his body, his activities, everything. That will make one fully absorbed in Krishna without deviation. This will help one transfer to Krishna Loka. One should not be deviated by unscrupulous commentators. One must engage in the 9 different processes of devotional service, beginning with hearing, chanting about Krishna. Pure devotional service is the highest achievement of human society. The 7th and 8th chapters of Bhagavad Gita have explained pure devotional service to the Lord that is free from speculative knowledge, mystic yoga, and fruitive activities. Those who are not purely sanctified may be attracted by different features of the Lord, like the impersonal Brahmajyoti and localized Paramatma. But a pure devotee directly takes to the service of the Supreme Lord. There's a beautiful poem about Krishna, which is clearly stated that any person who is engaged in the worship of demigods is most unintelligent, cannot achieve at any time the supreme award of Krishna. The devotee in the beginning may sometimes fall from the standard, but still he should be considered superior to all other philosophers and yogis. One should always engage in Krishna consciousness. One who always engages in Krishna consciousness should be understood to be a perfectly saintly person. His accidental, non-devotional activities will diminish, and he will soon be situated without any doubt in complete perfection. Pure devotee has no actual chance to fall down, because the Supreme Godhead personally takes care of his pure devotees. Therefore, the intelligent person should take directly to the process of Krishna consciousness, happily live in the material world. He will eventually receive the supreme award of Krishna. So the verse again, Manmana bhava bhakto majaji varnamaskuru mame vaishasi yuktaivam atmaram matparayanaha. Engage your mind always in thinking of me, become my devotee. Offer your obeisances to me and worship me. Being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutaya Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami 26.12.2021. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskyatyade. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna told Arjuna in the 12th chapter, he suggested to Arjuna that Arjuna should simply think about Krishna and engage all Arjuna's intelligence in Krishna consciousness. Thus, Krishna says one will live with him always without any doubt. On the other hand, Krishna said for those who cannot fix their mind completely and utilize their intelligence completely to serve Krishna, then one should take to the process of devotional service, sadhana bhakti, and this way develop the desire to obtain him. So basically, we're trying to increase our desire. Devotional service is not a mechanical process. It's a process by which the soul itself tries to awaken its dormant consciousness by following the process that's given to us by Krishna and his representatives. That doesn't mean that one will always be successful, quote, successful. In other words, one's objectives may not always be successful. But Krishna doesn't tell Arjuna that you should only do the things that you'll be successful at. He tells Arjuna we should do the things that Krishna wants us to do. And whether we're, quote, successful or not, that's not the point. The real point is that we're doing it for Krishna, as Krishna wants, through Krishna directing us through Guru, Sadhana, and Shastra. And ultimately, Krishna says, if we're working according to Guru, Sadhana, and Shastra, sincerely trying to become steady, trying to be enthusiastic in spite of any problems, then Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam. And Krishna gives us more intelligence by which we can understand everything better, by which we will not become deviated from Krishna consciousness and pure devotional service so easily. One becomes to the platform of Nishtha as Krishna gives more intelligence, so then one becomes fixed in one's service to Krishna. But we have to see that devotional service is not just a question of doing things. It's a question of utilizing everything we have that we have influence over, namely even our intelligence, our faith, our minds, our activities, our refuge. These are all supposed to be engaged in Krishna's service. So to develop our intelligence in Krishna's service, we hear. Now, this kind of hearing or this kind of intelligence is not mundane intelligence. How to become expert in so many material activities. Certainly, if one wants to become an expert golf player or a tennis player or a basketball player, then there are experts in that field. They can certainly give us the intelligence how we can practice and become more better, at least in those particular sports. But that has nothing to do with the soul, nor does it have anything to do with the super soul. It's just a different activity of the gross and subtle material body. But devotional service is intelligence, how to utilize the body, the mind, the words, the intelligence, everything in order to please Krishna. Especially how to develop intelligence, how to become expert in relationships to others, so that we encourage them to take up the process of devotional service, or we assist them in their progress in devotional service. This is what Krishna wants. And as much as we work in that with that understanding, then Krishna, Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam, he gives us intelligence to understand it even more profoundly. The material world is more or less based upon the fact that the living entity has become enamored with the material energy. He finds material energy quite exciting, which is normal. It's not abnormal, because the material energy also comes from Krishna. And therefore it has some of Krishna's attractiveness. It has some of Krishna's beauty. It has some of Krishna's knowledge. It has some of Krishna's power. The material nature also. And therefore, one has to become convinced that rather than utilize my body, my mind, my words, my intelligence, my faith and refuge in something temporary. Now, for us in the Western world, generally speaking, people are worshiping people who are quite insignificant. But we become so much covered over by Kali Yuga that people are actually excited about worshiping people who have doing nothing of any real value. Because we're worshipers by nature. If we don't worship Krishna, then we'll be forced to worship something or someone else. Everyone is worshiping something. If they don't worship anything else, then they worship their body. We see people everywhere in the world nowadays walking around taking selfies. And when they look at their selfie, they become enlivened. They think, how is it possible I could be so fortunate to have association with such a wonderful body? Now, at the time of death, no one takes a selfie, because that's not exactly so encouraging. But still, as long as there's some energy in the material world to gratify the senses, we're enamored with this body as the source of our pleasure and happiness. Therefore, by hearing about Krishna, at least we hear that there's a potential of becoming happier than we can by sense gratification. We can become happier if we concentrate the mind upon Krishna. So to concentrate the mind upon Krishna, first of all, we have to become convinced that I should be doing that. There are so many desires and thoughts that we have that distract us, but even if we become distracted, still, with a little intelligence, we have to withdraw our minds and bring it back under Krishna's control. Krishna's control means that if I'm doing some service in the consciousness that everything belongs to Krishna, and therefore not being anxious to the results of my activities, as soon as we forget that everything is Krishna's property, then we become anxious to the results of the activity, as if we have something to gain or we're fearful about something that we might lose. Rather than becoming anxious to gain Krishna consciousness and being fearful of being placed in Maya. So it is not exactly the results of our activities that we should be anxious about. It's whether or not we're doing what we're supposed to do, and whether added to that, we're trying to please Krishna by that activity. Certainly, if it's successful, our endeavor, we make devotees, or we distribute a lot of books, or we memorize some verses, or we dance ecstatically before the deity. That's certainly to our credit, eternal credit, but that's not the end of the story. Even in the spiritual world, where everyone is always in ecstasy, they don't think, well, let me take a vacation from Krishna consciousness for a few minutes. Let me try out Maya for a little bit, see what that's like. That's why we're in the material world, because that's what we thought. We were dancing with Krishna, or we knew about Krishna, we were completely ecstatic. And then someone came along and said, did you hear about Maya? I said, no, what's Maya? We'd like to experience it. It's really amazing. It's really something you can only experience once in your existence. Would you like it? So if we advertise anything enough times in the right way, people become interested in trying it out. You can take the most horrible foods. Like nowadays, they decided, some people decided, that people should not eat regular food. They should eat insects for the climate change or whatever, food shortages. Everyone should eat insects. I guess no one's worried about there's going to be a shortage of insects. So generally speaking, most of us, we were told that but if it's advertised enough times and in the right way, a beautiful picture of a cockroach and, covered with sour cream and a slice of pizza on the side, we may think, well, anyhow, let me give it a try. There are cultures where people regularly eat cockroaches because that's become the norm in their culture. What to speak of bats or other kinds of lizards, snakes. This is the regular part of some people's menu because they've been brought up in a culture where this has become the norm. Similarly, whatever we hear the glory is about, then if we hear it if they're expert at glorifying something, they put enough devotion and enough feeling into it, then people may become attracted to try it out and see what it's like. Now, Krishna consciousness is also, we're trying to hear from the right source, people are actually convinced that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which means he's the reservoir of all love and all pleasure. There's nothing equal to Krishna in love and pleasure, nor will there ever be anything be equal to Krishna in love and pleasure. And therefore, one who's convinced of that by personal experience, they can advertise for Krishna that, why don't you try it out? It's not very difficult, but you have to give up your desire to exploit and enjoy the material nature. We can't love God and at the same time compete against him. We can't be envious of God and at the same time love him at the same time. any more than we can fan the deity with one hand and step on his foot with the other, or with the leg. Generally speaking, when we fan the deity, we don't try and step on the deity's legs. Similarly, if we try to love Krishna, we should give up those things as much as possible, which take our mind to some other subject matter, and more or less produce some feeling that we're going to become the enjoyers and the controllers of this material energy. Therefore, although we cannot generally directly approach Krishna, still we approach Krishna through the devotees. Therefore, to think about Krishna means, first of all, to establish loving relationships with the devotees. Unless we have loving relations with the devotees, we won't be able to even execute the first words of Krishna in this verse, manmana. If we don't like someone, we can't hear from them. If we don't like someone, they may speak to us, and all our minds would tell us about all the negative qualities that we perceive in the person, why we should listen to them. If we don't love someone, we won't accept what they're telling us. Therefore, we find in Kali Yuga, people sometimes, they claim they're in love with each other, but then due to some animosity, they stop hearing from each other, and therefore the relationship diminishes. And hearing is not the only business. The business is also not only to hear, but to also understand what the person's saying. We don't know if we're actually hearing unless we actually find out if we're listening to what they're actually saying. And the only way we could do that is to ask them, is this what you mean? Is this what you're trying to tell me? Is this what you want me to do? Rather than they tell us something, we think, well, I don't know. I don't want to do that, but I do want to do something, so I'll do what I want to do. Prabhupada said this is called whimsical. Unless we're prepared to become a servant of Krishna's servants, then progress in devotional service, beginning with hearing about Krishna, is difficult. Because although it appears to us that someone other than Krishna is talking, but actually when we're dealing with devotees, generally speaking, it is Krishna talking to us. Because Krishna is equally in the heart of all living entities. He's also, especially in the heart of the devotee. And when the devotee is sincerely, based on his or her own realization, conveying Krishna's message, we can understand that this is actually Krishna conveying the message to us. Mostly is a material conception of who we're dealing with, rather than the actual conception that we're dealing with Krishna's servants. So we want to have a nice relation with the devotees, and the best way of doing that is to hear from them. Everyone wants a good servant. No one will reject a good servant. And therefore, when if we become a good servant to the devotees, then automatically they'll appreciate what we're saying. And they'll want to hear from us. And at the same time, we'll be able to convey to us knowledge which will be essential to our spiritual advancement. So we should not think that devotional service or sadhana bhakti is apart from our everyday relationships, not only with the devotees, but even with the non-devotees. That we have to become expert in our dealings with others and make them as Krishna conscious as possible. Then we'll be able to hear from Krishna and from his representatives, and we'll become inspired to become an actual devotee of Krishna. As Prahlad Maharaj said, when Nrsimhadev was offering him some benedictions, Prahlad Maharaj said, I don't want to become a vanik, which means a businessman. I didn't approach you and try to serve you in order to get something in return. Actually, I'm doing it just out of love for you. And if you want to help me at all, then help me help the other conditioned souls come back to you. Because I feel sad that there's so many living entities in this world in complete forgetfulness of you. And therefore I'm working to help them revive their relationship with you. So we understand that every living entity is just like we are. then we'll be sad to see so many conditioned souls suffering. But that doesn't mean that we go out and try and save everyone. We have to develop some intelligence so that we can at least save ourselves. And as much as we can save ourselves, and Krishna will also give us intelligence to save others simultaneously. Which means everyone we come in contact with, even our husbands or our wives or our children, we shouldn't think that these are mine, that these belong to me, that they're there for my happiness. We should think that I'm their servant, and I should learn from Krishna how to interact with them in such a way as to help them become Krishna conscious. And that will automatically help me become Krishna conscious too, if I'm thinking like that. If I'm taking shelter of the super soul and the instructions of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, then my relationships, if they become Krishna conscious, then they'll become much more enjoyable and full of rasa. Just like the wives of the Jagat Brahmins, they gave up their husbands and went to the forest to bring food to Krishna, Balaram, and the cowherd boys. But because they were Brahminis, and Krishna was a cowherd boy, a Vaishya, a relationship between a Vaishya and a Brahmini, a conjugal relationship between them, even on the spiritual platform, was not considered to be very desirable. And therefore Krishna told the wives of the Jagat Brahmins to go back home and be with their husbands. So they were fearful that now we've left everything, we've left our husbands, and now they'll reject us. But Krishna said, no, if you actually become my sincere devotee, then any sincere person, they won't reject you. Knowing that you're my sincere devotee, they'll accept you and learn from you. And indeed, when the
Guru
wives
Maharaj, can you please slow, медленнее? Лавангалата не успевает.
Okay. When the wives of the Jagat Brahmins went back to their house, then the Brahmins who were performing the sacrifice actually appreciated their wives, thinking that they're much more advanced than we are, that they surrendered everything to Krishna. They understood that he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore, actually, we should learn from them. And according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, indeed, Krishna stayed in the area where the Brahmins were performing yajna just to give the Brahmins some association. Because although they had recognized that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, still out of fear of Kamsa, their homes and go to Radha, out of his causeless mercy, stayed in that area, and still Krishna gave the Brahmins who were performing sacrifices association. So the point is that if we become a real devotee of Krishna, then those who are not out and out demons, they'll appreciate us. Of course, those who are actual demons like Kamsa or Hiranyakashipu was not favorable towards Prahlad, although Prahlad was a great devotee of Krishna. As a matter of fact, because Prahlad was a great devotee of Krishna, therefore Hiranyakashipu was even more angry with Prahlad. But those who are sincere, those who are actually innocent, they'll appreciate it as much as we become a devotee, that everyone will appreciate Krishna more when they see examples of real devotees. Those who have actually devoted their lives in the service of Krishna and his friends in Vrindavan under the direction of his representatives, and actually become happy and knowledgeable how to make others happy and give them real knowledge. So this Hare Krishna movement is a very simple movement. We're teaching people to hear about Krishna in such a way that they will have a tendency to become Krishna's devotee, because Krishna is so great. And then we teach people how to worship Krishna in order to actually become a devotee of Krishna. And then as they realize how wonderful and great Krishna is, then naturally they'll feel meek and humble and want to worship Krishna and surrender to him. Then Krishna doesn't leave it at there. He says, you should give up everything. Krishna doesn't want us to be a little bit in Maya and even a lot in Krishna consciousness. He wants us to be completely in Krishna consciousness. And therefore, in order to do that, the memories that we have that we might be attached to of our bad association in the past, bad association means those who are materialistic, those who are not devotees, those who are not engaged in devotional service, or what to speak of those who are envious of Krishna, that even subtly will give up their association. Then the result is that we'll become in touch with Krishna, in unity with Krishna's plan, his mission, and we'll try to help whoever we meet make some advancement in Krishna consciousness. It won't have to be forced, it'll just be spontaneous, because we'll actually have compassion for all living entities. Now, even now we don't have so much compassion, even for our own selves. Still, we even mechanically follow the process, then gradually we'll become purified. And then one day this natural devotion to Krishna, natural compassion for all living entities will be awakened. Natural distaste, the things that draw our mind from Krishna, will naturally be awakened by following the process to the best of our ability. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions?
Матаджи Лангалата, я вам там вопрос в WhatsApp написал. Вы в Zoom напишите? В Zoom напишите. Guru Maharaj, Mataji Lvangalata translate question from Russian to English.
Okay.
1 minute.
I just flew in from Spain. Now I'm in New York right now.
Yes.
So I'll have to spend some days readjusting again. Completely different climate and atmosphere and time zone, etc., etc. Okay, you have a question?
I have a question, but not related to class.
No, don't ask questions not related to class, and we'll go off on a tangent.
Okay.
Radha, what happens to people who are unconscious of they've lost their memory at the time of death, don't remember Krishna because they're unconscious? Well, Krishna says, whatever one thinks of at the time of death, that's where he'll go. So nothing happens by accident. If one is completely unconscious and leaves the body, depends. If there's a devotee, which will help. And if they're a non-devotee, it's not by accident. They're unconscious at the time of death, and they'll get the results of their work in this lifetime, whatever that might be. But for more details, you'll have to ask Yamaraj, because he has a whole manual about that. But I don't know where to find it. Maybe it's on the internet. I don't know. But if a devotee practices trying to become Krishna conscious at the time of, throughout his life, then Krishna will help the devotee at the time of death also to appear within his mind. It's Krishna who appears within the mind. It's not simply by our effort that Krishna appears. It's also by our devotion and Krishna's willingness to do it. Yes. Who's next? Pablo, Petita Pavana. Is that you? Did you have a question, Petita Pavana? Can you hear me?
Yes, Guru Maharaj. I write my question in group Zoom.
It says yes. Actually, my mice, Petita Pavana says his mice is disabled. Well, that's good. He's not going to run around all the time then. Otherwise, it's quite difficult trying to be on a conference with a mouse running around. Okay, Alexander Bulgari. Did you have a question? Alexei? Okay, let's see. Agnihotra is it. This verse says to get knowledge from a bona fide spiritual master. This verse says, yes.
Харе Кришна, дорогой гуру Махарадж, можно задать вопрос? Микрофон, пожалуйста. Как мне говорить? Можно, да?
Можно. Могу.
Дорогой гуру Махарадж, у меня такой есть вопрос. Как?
Well, нам нужно переводчик. Levangalata Mataji puede переводчик.
Он, его слышно и на русском, и на английском. Просто я постараюсь.
Okay.
Дорогой гуру Махарадж, у меня такой вопрос. Вот сейчас в последнее время так часто проходят ваши трансляции, прямые лекции. Вот, но, к сожалению, в те дни, когда происходят встречи с вами, в Zoom, если это суббота, то у нас день Санкиртана выходного дня. Если воскресенье, вот как сегодня, то это воскресная программа. И хотел у вас спросить, как правильно будет посещать ли встречи с вами, прямые трансляции, и пропускать программы, вот, или...
Это вопрос очень долгий.
Он очень важный для меня, потому что я не знаю, как правильно поступить.
Круто.
Hare Krishna, dear Guru Maharaj. Last time your lectures are often every 2 weeks, but unfortunately on Saturday I go to Sankirtana. If your class at Sunday, then I go to the Sunday program. What to do for me? Go to program of Sankirtana or go your class?
Well, the classes are recorded. You can listen to the class later. Anyway.
Один старший преданный мне вчера говорит, что я неправильно делаю, что пропускаю лекции. Когда есть возможность общаться вживую с духовным учителем, то нужно общаться. Я поэтому решил задать этот вопрос, потому что Санкиртана выходного дня, и так как я за нее ответственен, она проходит регулярно на протяжении 4 лет, и я не только от меня это зависит, то есть ко мне целая группа от меня зависит, то есть я не могу приносить вот такой момент, как здесь не быть. Простите, пожалуйста.
Guru Maharaj, the senior devotee of my yatra, said that I doing wrong that miss your classes and I must go into your classes, but I am leader of Sankirtana in Rostov-on-Don, and if I go to your classes, I don't organize Sankirtana.
Yeah, why can't you listen to the class later, the recording of it? Почему не слушать это урок поздно? Это урок, это в интернет тоже.
Кришна. Да, я услышал, что просто я начал переживать, потому что мне преданный сказал, что я неправильно поступаю, и...
Окей, Харе Кришна.
Спасибо вам большое, дорогой Гуру Махарадж.
So Agnihotra asks, This verse says to get knowledge from a bona fide spiritual master. This verse says to get knowledge from a true spiritual master, not from authoritative source. What are the criteria of a true spiritual master? How to determine if you're getting knowledge from a non-authoritative source? Well, Krishna is the authority. And one who repeats Krishna's message, according to time, place, and circumstance, then he's Krishna's representative. So we have to know what Krishna's message is. We have to know what Krishna is trying to tell us. And therefore, knowing what Krishna wants, therefore we'll be able to hear from Krishna's representatives properly. Just like Prabhupada gives the example, if you want to go to a grocery store and ask for them to please sell you some gold, you went to the wrong place because they don't sell gold in the grocery store. So you have to know what they sell in the grocery store. You have to know what you were interested in getting and where to get it. So an actual bona fide representative of Krishna is one who actually repeats Krishna's message, coming in disciple succession. And even better than that is one who acts according to Krishna's instructions. Not only says something, but also does something. And he talks about what he himself is doing in relation to serving Krishna, according to Krishna's instructions. Pavana, is your mouse better now?
Well, 1, 2, 3, Hare Krishna. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, it works then. Can I circle back to the first question about consciousness at the time of death and unconsciousness at the time of death? I was studying that when Tamal Krishna Goswami passed away, he was, at least it was reported that he was deep in his sleep when he hit the tree with the cab driver on his way from Mayapur. And then a whole bunch of Vaishnava philosophers started to discuss that topic, like what if some Vaishnava, advanced Vaishnava, leaves his body while sleeping, like in that explicit example. And I just wanted to say that when one's devotional and pious stock is huge, Krishna deliberately, it was explained that Krishna can deliberately enter the mind of a devotee and create his state of existence that he will remember eventually and determine his destination, even though he may be unconscious or in sleep. So in other words, in some special limb or intermediary space, a soul is given chance to express his or her will and determine what he's going to focus on. So if you could cast some light on that and explain us, like really what happens if devotee hits a tree while asleep, or simply has a stroke or passes away during deep sleep or something like that, or in coma, anesthesia during open surgery or something. It's an interesting topic. Like if Krishna says, like whatever state of existence one remembers, but often it happens in unconscious state.
Well, we can't say, unless we're the super soul, exactly what state of consciousness someone leaves their body. We can see by their general activities during this lifetime what's a likely scenario for them remembering at the time of death. But still, it's not that devotional service, according to Krishna, neha vikarma nashasti pratyavayo navidite swapam apyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. On this path, there's no loss or diminution, and even a little advancement can protect one from the greatest danger. So if one is sincerely engaged in devotional service and becoming Krishna conscious, then Krishna will help somehow or another at the time of death, no matter what circumstances one finds himself in. Just like there's a place in Mayapur where Hari Haraya is worshipped. The combination of Lord Shiva, Hara, and Hari, Krishna. It's half Lord Krishna and half Lord Shiva, the deity. And it says that anyone who dies in that place, then Lord Shiva personally comes and whispers the name of Lord Hari in their ear. So therefore Krishna is not indifferent, and even Lord Shiva is not indifferent. So if we take shelter of them, especially Krishna, then they'll certainly help us in any circumstance. But that's not exactly our business, is to speculate, what state of consciousness is. It's just mental speculation. Those who like someone will think that they went back to Godhead. And those who are envious of someone will say they went to hell. So how do they know where they went? And they personally take a trip and interviewed them? Like trying to ask someone, trying to go to an astrologer who's not 100% expert and asking, what was I in my last lifetime? And if they tell you you were a great demigod, we'll think, well, that's great. They're obviously a good astrologer. If they said you were a rat, we'll think, can you calculate again? There must be some mistake in your calculation. So generally, according to our state of consciousness, our consciousness, Atmanam Manyate Jagat, we infuse others their state of consciousness, where we think they're at, what their state of consciousness is. But generally speaking, no one is unconscious. It's only in deep sleep. But generally speaking, after some trauma and something like that, Krishna can, even if it's deep sleep, if Krishna, if he wants, he can enter and wake, tell them, appear within their mind, just like Krishna appeared to Parikshit Maharaj. Although Parikshit Maharaj's body was burnt by the weapon, the Brahmastra of Ashwatthama, still Krishna appeared even within the womb of Uttara and gave Parikshit Maharaj a new body. So Krishna is all powerful. He can do whatever he wants. And whatever he does is good for everyone. All right, so I think we'll stop there. Thank you all. Grantaraj Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai.
Small question from Vamana Prabhu.
Vamana, okay.
Hare Krishna, dear Guru Maharaj, please accept my mother left the body a few days ago. Please, how to conduct it? What offerings and rituals are carried out?
Well, the most important one is to chant Hare Krishna. Pray for her that she can get all the mercy of Krishna and the Vaishnavas, and that wherever she goes, as Parikshit Maharaj said, that at least she'll take birth in the family of devotees, continue on with her devotional service if she hasn't gone back to the spiritual world. So well-being, Krishna will take that into account and help whatever. Okay. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakti Jai.
Haribo, Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
Thank you.